Hi, welcome to Noumena, the only place that's reverse engineered the College Board. We're going to show you how to solve these problems very quickly with mathematical precision and with 100% confidence. That means you no longer have to rely on the answer key, but purely on the power of knowledge. The mind is a powerful tool, and we're going to show you how to use it. Here's how it's done. Question 14. The newly elected Prime Minister, to the dismay of opponents from other parties, have argued for the strict regulation of campaign financing. Alright, so you guys know the drill. We're going to go from A to B to C to D, looking for all possible errors, checking for all possible errors, until we find one, or if we do not find an error, then we can go ahead and confidently circle E. Got it?
Great.
Alright, so let's start with A. The newly elected Prime Minister. A. What are we testing for here, Anthony Sonsenin?
Well, elected is the past participle of the form of the verb to elect.
Okay.
So what do we say about past participles that stand alone? This is tricky because elected is a regular verb, so elected by itself can also function as a verb in the sentence, but just the position of where it's placed here tells us that its functioning as an adjective. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, I can see that. Yes, it's an adjective. Okay.
Because it's modifying prime minister. So
yes.
In that case, we can just say that elected would be a verb form and function as a modifier. So we're going to just do a check. And can prime ministers be elected? They certainly can.
Sure
So the newly elected prime minister seems to work. Keep in mind, verb forms can be tricky. So the alternative to elected, there's another verb form that can function as an adjective. The alternative to elected, the past participle would be the present participle electing. But if we were to change A to the newly electing prime minister, that would mean that the prime minister is doing the act of electing. That doesn't seem to make much sense because that wouldn't be much of an election at all. So clearly, prime minister is receiving the act of being elected, not doing the act of electing.
Okay.
So the verb form here seems to work. The past participle does seem to work. So we've exhausted all the potential errors that A could have, and now it seems like A has none of the errors that we thought of.
Great. So I think now we can move on to B. Let's take a look at B. To the dismay, the newly elected Prime Minister, to the dismay of opponents from other parties. Alright, so for this error, we're going to look at, well, whether or not we have a modifier problem. Do we?
We do. We don't have a modifier problem because to the dismay, this prepositional phrase is modifying the verb have argued. And prepositional phrases can do that. They can function as either adjectives or adverbs. In this case, it's functioning as an adverb. And they're allowed to do that. We can't get angry at them about that.
Yeah, I guess we can't we? Alright, so it looks like B's okay. Well, let's move on then. C, have argued. We're going to test for subject verb, verb tense, and verb form for C, have argued. Well, let's start with subject verb. What's our subject of our sentence? Prime Minister. Well, it looks like Prime Minister is singular, but the verb have argued is plural. It looks like we have an error here. What do you think, Anthony Sonsenin?
We do. I know some of you who struggle with English have difficulty differentiating has and have. It's the same verb, except has is singular and have is plural. So, Prime Minister is singular, So we need has argued. So anytime you have a multiverb where the multiverb involves a helping verb, such as the form of the verb to be, or the form of the verb to have, which is in this case, that helping verb must agree in number with the subject. So in this case, the correct verb here would be has argued.
Great. Okay.
It's a pretty easy question, except if they try to throw you off between the commas and the commas. You see to the dismay of opponents from other parties. The College Board often does that. So you really, really need to look at the bottom points that we've listed on the slide, because we got lucky with subject verb, but this could have been a verb tense question. It could have been a verb form question.
Okay.
So this just happened to be an easy question, but if we didn't do the check, we may have overlooked the whole thing and tried to look for error somewhere else.
Great. Well, would you mind? Is it okay if we check D and see if there was any errors in D, just in case?
I think we're going to have to check D.
Okay, great. D, the strict regulation of campaign financing. Here, we're going to look for whether or not there's an idiom error or possibly number agreement.
What do we say about idioms?
Ah, that's right. Don't chase idioms. So, I'm not going to chase this idiom. The strict regulation of. Even if you're not sure of an idiom, don't chase idioms. Okay, guys?
Yeah, the reason we put the idiom point down is because of the preposition of. And oftentimes on the College Board, they test you on a verb that takes on a certain preposition, or an adjective that may take on a certain preposition, or even a noun that may take on a certain preposition. But these questions are rather rare. So anytime you see a preposition, although you should understand that it may be an idiom question, if we didn't tell you that it's an idiom question, if we didn't feed you the idiom, what do?
Don't chase it.
Don't chase it. So here we're going to do a number agreement check. Why? Because regulation is a noun. So sometimes we have to match and see if this noun is consistent in number to some other noun or some other noun or nouns in the sentence.
Okay.
But
I don't see
any.
I don't see anything that would change or alter regulation at all. I think it's okay.
Right. It seems absolutely fine. And yeah. So and notice, like, usually, words that end in tion. Of course, remember, this is English. There are always exceptions, but anytime a noun ends in tion, about maybe a good, I can't give you, I'm going to give you a percentage, but of course it's not an exact figure. Maybe 60-65% of the time, it doesn't require, there are no plural forms to it. For example, like intimidation, we wouldn't use intimidations. So in this case, regulation can take on plural forms, but again, there's no number agreement error here.
Great. Okay, so we've gone through A, B, C, and D, and we found an error in C. So could we confidently go ahead and circle C?
Absolutely.
So
C, again, we went through all the checks. Newly elected, to the dismay of opponents from other parties, have argued for the strict regulation of campaign financing, and we found the subject verb error. We didn't go over the tense, but I kind of want to just go over the tense and see. Does this tense work? It does, because the Prime Minister was newly elected. This act just happened. And when you're discussing or trying to describe an action that just happened, and you see words like newly or recently, the present perfect tense is actually the best tense that would describe such a situation. So, how do we correct this, Brian Zalim?
Alright, well, we could correct this by first getting rid of have and replacing it with our singular verb has.
Great. So we retain the tense, and the modifier newly fits very nicely with this tense, and we've corrected the subject verb error.
Great. Noumena, empowering mind.